I'm Jesse with Living Tree Community Foods, and it is our privilege today to be with Darro Grieco, the man who creates our California Heritage olive oil. And Darro, we were wondering if you could give us an overview of how your historic olive grove came into being.
Sure. Well, actually, in the 1800s, there was an attempt to create an olive industry in California. Many trees were planted, some groves in Southern California, some here. It ended up that the attempt failed because the oils coming from Europe always were cheaper, and it was known actually from the very beginning, 1900, that almost all of the oils were deficient oils, but they were cheaper, and so the industry failed. And then a woman named Frida Emmon showed up in our area and saw the olives available, so she went to the University of California to see if they could develop a process for safely curing olives to use as table olives. They did that, and that began the new interest in olives. But subsequent to that, a number of professors from the University of California formed the Berkeley Olive Association and planted this grove. It is they said, and newspapers said, the largest planting of mission variety olives in the world. That's the heirloom variety for California. And interestingly enough, they planted it for olive oil.
And the grove itself has a very special name.
It's called Berkeley Olive Grove. They formed the Berkeley Olive Association and went back and forth from here to the grove itself, which is in the center of Butte County between the towns of Oroville and Chico. But they named it the Berkeley Olive Grove, and it is now eligible for the state and national registries of historic places as the Berkeley Olive Association District.
How exciting.
We have about 400 acres at this time.
And what's the average age of the trees?
Spring of 2013 is the centennial of when they were planted. They were planted in spring 1913.
How exciting. How magnificent. Hundreds of the trees, 100-year-old trees, and they're still fruiting.
Well, this is a traditional orchard, and we are interested in really the holistic, the natural approach to life, and this is the way things always used to be before industrial agriculture. So trees are planted at a spacing and in a way that they can actually survive in nature without artificial supplements. And here at 100 years old, we are deriving from these trees some of the best olive oil anywhere.
How magnificent. That's so exciting. And so the question naturally arises, what is unique and special about your olive oil?
The olive grove itself we have it all as organic now. The entire estate is organic, but we're also dry farmed. And that means that the trees receive the rain from nature, but not otherwise irrigated. It's a little like making a wine from an old stressed vineyard. There's lower production, but a higher concentration in the fruit that remains. And the varietal that we have, which is Mission, is one that happens to be high in antioxidants. Polyphenols and tocopherols are both antioxidants, and so they're high in that, and that's probably enhanced by the fact that we are all done by hand and non-irrigated. We're actually finding some very unique factors about our olive oil, and I can talk to you about that if you like.
Well, by all means, my first question is, on average, by and large, how does the concentration of polyphenols in your olive oil compare to most olive oils out there?
In 2010, UC Davis tested a fairly broad range of olive oils that they purchased in stores throughout California, and they tested them primarily to see if they were in fact extra virgin. But at the same time, they tested for total phenols. And the average of the olive oils that passed as truly extra virgin was 222 on the Gallup scale. Mm-hmm. Our average that year was 378, and there were only two companies that they tested that were at the range of us. So we're at the very highest range of polyphenols or antioxidants. Yeah, so that's kind of an interesting point. Now we're also evolving into a brand new area of research just beginning now. Last year, around that same time, I met some scientists from Greece who were on sabbatical and working at UC Davis. They have tested 150 olive oils back in Greece, and then here in California, they have tested 6 of the California varietals, ours included. Of all of those olive oils they've ever tested from anywhere, ours shows a very clearly distinct, unique profile. And so we are right now doing further research in Europe to see if we can ascertain whether or not it's a varietal or the regional or the very specific conditions of our growth.
Wonderful.
But what it's showing is that this olive oil, compared with all the others that they've ever tested, are showing high amounts of polyphenols where you would expect to see them, but also many more specific phenols that don't show up in any other olive oil.
How exciting! That's very, very unique and specific indeed. So basically, is it correct to say, broadly speaking, that your olive oil has twice the amount of polyphenols as most other olive oils out there?
Yeah, let's say 1.5 times.
1.5 times.
The average was 222, and ours ranged around 378.
And the other question is, how old is the Mission varietal?
Okay. Missionaries, when they came from Europe to develop missions along the Pacific coast, they brought something, we don't know for sure. They might have been seedlings, they might have been cuttings that they could plant and become trees. Those were probably principally from Spain, but they could have been other areas in the Mediterranean, we just don't know. And they could have been a number of varietals, but those trees over time, since the 1700s, have adapted to this environment of Western United States, and by DNA they are now their own varietal, which is called Mission. So they go back to the late 1700s.
To the late 1700s?
Yeah, and that would be the original olive in California.
Okay, so at least a good solid 200 years in California.
Yes.
Exciting. Okay. And then, just generally speaking, if you could tell us in outline how the olive oil is made.
Well, there are many ways of making olive oil, just as I like to think of music. There are only a set number of notes, but from that number of notes you can make any kind of music. There are various basic ways to extract olive oil from the olive, but during that process, no matter what process you select, there are many ways that you can tweak it one way or another. Essentially, olive oil was, for most of history, ground with big stones to crush them, and then they were put between mats and they were pressed, and that heavy pressing would squeeze out the oil, and hence the term first cold press olive oil. That's not done very much anymore, principally for two reasons. When you crush the olives with a stone, it makes a mild flavor, but it's slow and increases the oxidation or the breakdown of the olive oil before you even have extracted it. And the second part is when you are pressing the oil from the mats, the first time or two is fine, but eventually the oil on the mats get rancid. So now we crush the olive by mechanical means. That paste is gone into, think of a giant ice cream maker, a churn of old days, if you know what that is. So it's a large vat with a that's churned. The paste is churned, and in that process, the very minute oil droplets coalesce with others, so they become large enough that they can be separated from the water in the husk. So the next phase is to spin this, and oil is lighter than water, and so you cut off the oil. And then the final process is to spin it again to separate it for purity. Now, that's still going to have a minute amount of particulate matter in it, but that oil coming directly from that last phase is what's known as oleo nuovo. And that is the oil that's just bursting with flavor until the particulate matter settles. So olive oil that we put into bottles or any kind of containers for consumption is either allowed to rest and the sediment go to the bottom, just the way you do with wine, and you rack off the clear oil, or you filter it.
So basically, the production of the olive oil is a centrifugal process.
The final separation of the oil from the husk and water is the centrifugal process, ordinarily. There are some other ways you can do it, but that most machinery does it by a centrifugal process.
Centrifugal process. Okay. At what time of year does the harvest occur?
Okay. Different varieties of olives mature at different times, but the earliest is maybe October, September, October. Our olives mature November, ordinarily in November. Last year we were quite a bit later than ordinary. This is a time when the temperatures are cool, and we try to harvest the olives as quickly as possible, get them to mill as quickly as possible, and then in the milling process, what I, in my extraction of olive oil, am very concerned about is keeping the temperature of the milling process cool. You can extract more olive oil and more quickly if you raise the temperature, but I want to keep it, specifically want to keep it cool because I'm concerned about keeping the enzymes in the olive oil alive and fresh. It's a fresh, raw product, only mechanically extracted, no chemicals, and at low heat.
What would you say would be the maximum temperature that the oil reaches?
In my case, about 73 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Large producers can go up to 115 degrees. That I know is a fact. Before I also said we begin in November ordinarily and we finish in January. So it's a several month process. The early olive oils create. Well, I begin harvesting and milling olive oil early, and then I monitor the polyphenols, and when I hit a peak, that's when I really begin my milling process.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's a wonderful thing to hear. So basically, you're telling me that the olive oil is created at room temperature.
Yes.
That's a magnificent thing.
I'm
sure our clients and customers will be very gratified indeed to hear that.
I at every step of the way I favor the quality and purity of the oil over the quantity of the oil. So I would rather give up even 20% of the oil, but to have the oil remaining be the very best that I can make and the very best that you can consume, as pure as possible.
I'm so pleased to hear that. That's magnificent. Could you tell us how the taste and flavor, because after all, tasting is believing, how taste and flavor of your olive oil compare to the others out there?
Well, there are hundreds of varieties of olives, and each variety has its own flavor. Just think of apples. There are different kinds of apples, and each apple has a different flavor. So the variety is going to be one factor in the flavor of the olive oil. The ripeness at which you pick and mill the olive is also going to be a factor. And then in that case, it's going to be whether it's a very green, piney, minerally, herbaceous kind of a flavor, strong, or a later harvest when the olive, which is a fruit, gets riper on the tree, then it becomes more fruitier toward, at the very end, toward tropical. So it's a matter of the variety and then when in the season you harvest. But then there are other factors, which is in the milling process. There are many choices you can make. how you crush it, what exact equipment you use, what temperatures you use, how long in this phase and in that phase.
Okay, and I understand that that your olive oil has been discovered, so to speak, and that you have won some professional awards.
We've won actually high awards every year since we started producing olive oil. One nice note this year at one of the premier olive oil competitions in the world, and certainly the premier olive oil competition in the United States, which is the only international one here. It's called the Los Angeles International Extra Virgin Olive Oil Competition. We have been selected by American and international judges as producing the finest delicate olive oil made in America.
How magnificent.
This year.
Congratulations. I'm delighted to hear
We were also given the same accolade in 2009.
Bravo. Congratulations. That's the best. That is the very, very best.
Now, that's a little different from the olive oil that I'm providing for your customers right now, because there are, and more as we go along, I'm segmenting what I'm making, and there are more and more people who are interested in the healthfulness of the olive oil, the health value, over the Epicurean side specifically. So to get high awards, you need these nice flavors and balances. But what I'm trying to do for you is to give you, I give you as good a flavor as I can, but I'm specifically trying to give you the highest polyphenols for health that I can. Now, the polyphenols are going to give you a bitterness and pungency in addition to the fruitiness. And that, when you taste it straight, seems strong. But that's a little like adding seasoning to your food as a food component. It enhances the flavor. And if you have an olive oil that does not have bitterness to it or gives you a little cough, it's a low polyphenol olive oil and not particularly healthful. I mean, it doesn't have the advantages of the high antioxidants, I should say.
Well, that is so. That's so indicative indeed, and I'm quite sure that our clients are going to be most gratified indeed to hear that. Let me ask another question. What challenges do you face?
This is a traditional olive grove. It's large. It is now a historic grove, but the challenge for American olive oil up until now, and including now, has been that European olive oil, or I should say olive oil emanating from Europe, which really is funneled through Europe, but it's olive oil from North Africa, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean countries. It's funneled usually through Italy, and it comes here. Most of which, back to UC Davis, the first test, 69% of the olive oils failed to be extra virgin. The second test was 73% failed to be extra virgin. So now what's happening here in America is there's a way of planting olive trees. They can only use 3 varietals, and they can be kept small. They can be made to produce very early, and they're planted very close together. Our traditional grove, which is one that obviously for 100 years can stay healthy and survive for another who knows how long. When the professors began our orchard, they thought of it as a 1,000-year project. Well, this other form of planting olives, which is called super high density, instead of having the 65 trees per acre that we have, they have about 620 trees per acre. Now, there's no way to maintain a tree like that without giving it supplements annually, and this is going back to the industrial form of agriculture, which is based on petroleum products, both for herbicides and for fertilizers and everything. So that's the main difference between what I'm doing and what the super high density groves are doing, but they are all mechanical in operation, and so their costs are lower. It's going to allow the American market consumer to find an American-made olive oil that's competitive in price with the European olive oils. Our challenge is to stay in business long enough for the customer to come to value specifically what we are bringing to market, which is special flavor, but also very unique health benefits. And our prices of production cannot possibly match the large industrial agriculture. Our cost is about double of what theirs is.
I think it's particularly tragic that even in the growing and production of olive oil, you have competitors with a factory farm type of mentality.
Well, not only that, right now, as we speak, about 1/3 of the olive oil in the world is basically in storage in Spain. They've had last year we had a very, very low crop yield in California. Spain had a bumper crop, but it's the largest producer in the world anyway. What they'll do is they'll store that in big tanks until they can finally market it. That might be several years from now. So that olive oil several years from now will be rancid, it'll be bad. The only option is to chemically strip everything from that olive oil and then bring some flavor and color back to it. Now they used to do that with a small portion of extra virgin olive oil, and they still do that sometimes, but sometimes they don't even put olive oil in. They just put in carotene and so that for color and flavor, and you're not getting any extra virgin olive oil at all.
You're telling me that human ingenuity is such, and the and the power of greed is such that they would actually put an extract from carrots that grow in the ground and put that in the olive oil.
And chlorophyll. Chlorophyll gives it the green.
and the carotene gives it a better appearance.
And aroma. This is a time when there are more and more people who are aware of true holistic life, nature, what nature is and what healthfulness is. And there are more and more farmers markets around, and there are more and more of us who are attempting to keep or bring back this traditional form of agriculture, which is bringing the whole food and the whole food in its full value, whether or not we understand every bit of that. You know, the nutritionists for the last 30, 40, 50 years haven't. They've figured out, well, okay, if a food has this component, you buy it for the component, not for the whole food. We're finally, hopefully, getting away from that and bringing back true whole foods to the consumer.
I'm so gratified to hear that. So then we can say that, in a sense, your work is an expression of the irrepressibility of life that bursts through the obstacles and the barriers that we continually face.
I think so, and it's a joy to my life to be able to do this.
I'm so glad to hear that, Darro. Well, thank you indeed. It has been a privilege and honor to speak with you.
And pleasure of mine as well.